On this episode of the Catholic Echo podcast from the Diocese of Youngstown, brought to you by the annual Diocesan Appeal and Cumulus Radio Youngstown, we're talking about National Marriage Week with Father John Sheridan, Miros and Theresa Maszczak, Madeleine Francisco, and Hannah Shaw. Find more about this episode's topic, including articles from the Catholic Echo, at www.catholicecho.org/podcast. And now the host of the Catholic Echo podcast, Dennis Viviana.
Hello and welcome to the Catholic Echo podcast. We are in the midst of National Marriage Week, and here to discuss the topic is the pastor of Divine Mercy Parish in Madeleine, the Dean of Stark County West Deanery, and Adjutant Judicial Vicar for the Diocese, Father John Sheridan. Thanks as always for joining us.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Now, National Marriage Week is something that is celebrated across the country. I guess, what is its purpose and why is it important for the Church to observe it?
Each year, the Secretariat on Laity, Marriage, and Family Life and Youth of the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops offers this around the week that we celebrate Valentine's Day, when people are, renewing their commitment to each other and celebrating the love that they share. This year's theme is Marriage, Source of Hope, Spring of Renewal, Pursue a Lasting Love. I think that speaks to us about the really important element that hope carries in a married life. In this Jubilee year of hope, we have a sense that hope is really a very important virtue in the life of a Christian. Not only hopes for, what comes about in this life and the dreams that we have, but also our hope in eternal life, our hope in salvation. And in married life in particular, that hope for salvation is a shared hope, right? You hope that you will be saved, of course, but you also hope that the ones you love, that your spouse, your children, your families will be saved with you. And so marriage is really an essential way in which we help one another in coming to faith, in coming to hope, in coming to love, and experiencing salvation. So I think that that's why this week is important, because it helps us to know that the Church supports us and continues to offer our prayers and resources to assist couples in their married life.
You touched on it a little bit, but what role do prayers and spiritual practices play in sustaining a strong marriage?
I think if you consider that marriage is not just a relationship between a husband and wife, but involves really a global importance, right? Married life is important not just for the couple, but for their family, for the community, for the world. It's also important for the Church and our relationship with God. And so in order to sustain a marriage, a joy-filled marriage, a hopeful marriage, it's important to remain connected to the Lord, and not only individually, but together as a couple, and to share a relationship of love with each other and with the Lord, and to grow in affection together in relationship to each other and with the Lord. So prayer each day together as a family, as a couple, I think can really be very sustaining in that life.
Now, I did some research for this interview, and Pew Research study showed that only 44% of millennials were married in 2019, a significant drop from Generation X and baby boomers generations, where 61% were married. And Gen Z believes in the sacrament of marriage even less. I guess, how concerned are you with these trends?
I'm very concerned. As I said earlier, marriage is important not just for the couple, but it has an impact on the whole world. Marriage is the way through which children are brought forth into the world to continue the population and to continue the faith. And so married life needs to be supported and sustained. And I think it's very concerning that less than half of people today are going down the path toward marriage. And really, marriage is more than that. It's also a gift of the self, right? We're not focused anymore on ourselves when we enter into marriage. It becomes a self-gift to another and for another. And so marriage requires one to be less selfish and less self-focused and self-centered and more outward in their love. And I think we need that in our society.
Definitely. Now, we're both of the millennial generation. I guess when you look out in the crowd, our generation isn't picking up the slack for bringing kids to Mass, or Generation Z as well. What's the answer to that, I guess?
I wish I had that answer. Our church would benefit from someone having that answer. You're right. When we look out in the pews, most of the parishioners we see tend to be older, baby boomers, or older than them even, Gen X too. The statistics on Gen Z and the millennials and the alpha generation these are much lower. I think it's important to get a sense of a return to the Lord, because He's the source of all good and every gift that we have. So I think if more people would return to church, perhaps some of these other statistics would benefit from that as well.
Of course, the Catholic education as well, definitely a plus, and it can keep you along that path. Now, one great event in our diocese 2 times a year is the wedding anniversary celebration, usually at St. Columba in May and at October in Canton. Many couples taking part have been married 25, 50 years plus. They renew their wedding vows. I guess, what has that experience been like for you, and what do you want younger generations to take away from that?
Even before I began work here in the tribunal at the Diocese of Youngstown, where we now work in the department with marriage, I was the rector of the Basilica of St. John the Baptist, where we host the one in Canton each year. And I was very grateful to be able to host that, because it was such an experience of shared love. You see all of these couples, 65 or 75 couples or more, that are celebrating significant anniversaries, and you get the sense that it hasn't always been easy, of course, but they've done it together, right? They have been a shining example for their faith family, for their own families, to see 25 years, 40 years, 50 years, 60, 65, 70 years sometimes people are celebrating together as a married couple. And what a blessing that is, not just for their family, but for all of us to witness.
One that stands out for me is Jimmy Carter. He was a preacher even into his 90s, and he and his wife married 77 years.
Yeah.
It's incredible. Now, any other frequently asked questions by couples who are to be married? What are some of the questions you get?
I deal with couples really throughout their married life, some who are preparing for marriage, some who are already married and talking through difficulties that they have, some who are experiencing great love for one another, right? We, as priests, we deal with people in all sorts of different ways, in the good times and the bad times. And I don't know that they ask too many questions about what married life is, but they ask how they can be supported by the church. They ask how they can remain faithful, how can they grow in their faith. Right, those are the kind of questions that people come to the church with. I think asking a celibate priest, what's married life going to be like, is probably not the best way to answer that question, right? But how can we be faithful in our life as a married couple? That's sort of the kind of question that I get.
How important is that retreat prior to marriage?
I think it's really important for a couple to go through that together, because they not only learn about the teaching of the church about marriage, but they also learn about each other. They learn to pray together. They learn to pray for each other. And those are the ways that their life will be sustained for 25, 40, 50, 60 years or plus, right? Because being there as a support for each other through it all will be what's most important.
Father Sheridan, just a last question is, where can married couples find out more information or more resources?
Our diocesan website has a great number of resources. So if you visit doy.org/marriage-and-family-life/
A lot of dashes in there, but you'll find a lot of great information on that as well. Father John Sheridan, thank you so much. Much more to come on National Marriage Week when the Catholic Echo podcast returns.
If you have a story idea for the Catholic Echo magazine, podcast, or website, send an email to catholicecho@youngstowndiocese.org. We'd love to hear your ideas.
Hello and welcome back to the Catholic Echo podcast as we continue our discussion on National Marriage Week. Joining us now is Miros and Theresa Maszczak. They are a couple from Canfield area who have been married more than 55 years. Thanks for joining us once again.
Thank you,
Thank
Dennis.
you for having us.
Getting started here, just for our listeners hearing from you for the first time, tell us about yourselves and your spiritual journey.
Well, Dennis, we were married 55 years ago last September. We were married at St. Stanislaus Church in Youngstown, Ohio. Of course, at that time we were young and naive and had a lot to learn about life. We did not know in those early years that our marriage was a vocation. As husband and wife, on our wedding day, we promised each other, in the presence of family and God, a lifetime commitment to love and have a family. Our commitment included being active parishioners of St. Michael's Parish in Canfield. We were RCIA sponsors, Eucharistic ministers, I taught CCD for a few years and served as a Mass coordinator. And then I did join the Knights of Columbus, Council 11369, and served as Grand Knight for a few years.
Now, Theresa, how do you believe faith has played a role in the success and longevity of your marriage?
Well, to us, faith is everything. As a married couple, we learned how to communicate and listen to each other through the gift of mutual trust and love. And apology also can go a long way. Love and sacrifice in our marriage meant putting aside selfishness and pride. We did a lot of praying, and we know that we are loved by God, and in turn we must love each other and our neighbors unconditionally.
Let's talk about some of your travels. I know you've been all over the country. Let's start with the National Eucharistic Congress.
We got involved with the Eucharistic revival just by following it pretty much, and it's a big devotion for us, the Eucharist, and we decided to go ahead and participate in the Eucharistic Congress in Indianapolis, and it was just an unbelievable experience. It was truly, many people have said, it's like being in heaven, and it was. The adoration every evening in the stadium, tens of thousands of people. There were children, religious, and the silence during the adoration and prayers, the singing. It was truly an experience that we could never have imagined. It was just a wonderful experience. It has definitely changed our lives.
Yeah, we'll probably never have another experience like that with the cardinals that were there, all the bishops. I think there were over 1,000 priests and seminarians, and then the throngs of people. Everyone was so kind and understanding, even though, it was crowded and it was difficult to get something to eat because every place was full. There was a spirit of joyfulness with everyone, and everybody was so happy. And it made us feel wonderful because we were part of this wonderful faith.
That's really great to hear. Now, recently, you guys mentioned 55 years of marriage. You celebrated your wedding vow, renewed those wedding vows at St. Charles. What was that experience like?
Well, of course, it's emotional to relive your wedding vows and to look your faithful companion in the eyes and just know that it's been a wonderful life. Through our faith, I think it's brought us together even more closely. We do things together. We've raised some wonderful kids. It was a terrific feeling, really.
And Theresa, you said prayer was a big part of your life with your children. How do you make sure that tradition continues with your grandchildren?
Most importantly, I think, would be as parents and grandparents of 6 grandchildren, we hope that our example of our lives together and the love that we share help our children and our grandchildren to know that kindness and love of family, love of God will go a long way.
You'd mentioned off camera just a little bit about in Bosnia and their marriages. Can we talk about the interesting story that you found out?
Yes, this very interesting story about a town in Bosnia-Herzegovina and the marriage crucifix. There's a town in Bosnia with a population of about 30,000 people, 13,000 are Catholic, and not one single divorce has ever been recorded. The explanation is that couples in this small town center their lives around Christ and the cross. They exchange marriage vows while holding the cross, and the priest would say, "You have found your cross. It is a cross to love, a cross to bear, a cross that should not be rejected but cherished." The cross is placed in a prominent place in their home after marriage as a reminder of their commitment to each other and to God, and it's the center of it all.
That's incredible and fascinating at the same time, right?
Yes, it is. And just like in our lives, at difficult times, we all should kneel to the cross and bow and repent and seek forgiveness of each other. God is the only one that can help us in these difficult times.
Amen. Now let's talk about one of your exhibits that you've been presenting in different parishes across the diocese, chronicling the life of Blessed Carlo Acutis.
Well, yes, Miros and I are custodians of the Eucharistic Miracles exhibit. We had our first exhibit display at St. Charles in October, and we're scheduled to do one at St. Luke's during Lent. And also we're going to be scheduling one with Monsignor Sifrin at St. Ed's, and this is basically through St. Columba Parish. The focus is, of course, Carlo Acutis. He's blessed right now, but he will be canonized April 27th, I believe, and in Assisi. This young man, as a child, he had a Polish nanny that took care of him when his parents were working. They happened to live right across the street from the Catholic Church, and his parents were not practicing Catholics, and this Polish nanny took this little boy across the street to Mass every day. He was like maybe 4 years old, and he learned to truly love Jesus Christ in the Eucharist, and he loved the Holy Family. And this carried over into as he grew up, he got a little bit older, and as a young adult, 11 or 12-year-old young child, he became very proficient at working on the computer and the internet, and he decided, because Jesus was his life, and that's all he ever thought of, and was trying to promote, the love of Jesus to everybody. He put together the Eucharistic miracles all around the world, put it in digital form, and he compiled them. So this is a big part of our exhibit, is introducing everybody to Carlo Acutis and the work that he did for our benefit, so we can believe. He wanted us to share, all of us to share in the love of the Eucharist, which is our primary reason we go to Mass, and it is, for our Catholic faith, is everything. It's a source and summit.
Well said. Miros, what's next for both of you? You both set goals? Do you have aspirations when it comes to your faith life?
Well, of course, the big thing we want to do is continue our evangelization process. Catholics aren't real good at evangelizing, but we're trying to get better at it. So we're continuing to read a lot of good Catholic books and deepen our faith and understanding of it so that we could put it across to those that seem to be non-believers. We're busy at the church at St. Charles as Eucharistic ministers, readers, and so on, but we're also doing some talks now and then. So that's all going to be part of the Eucharistic exhibit that we have.
Any other trips you're looking forward to?
Yes, as a matter of fact, we are going in May to Ireland and then Medjugorje.
Oh, wow. That'll be a great experience, I'm sure. Well, thank you so much, Miros and Theresa Maszczak, for sharing your time and your spiritual journey with us. Coming up next on the Catholic Echo podcast, we'll check in with Katie Wagner, who will interview some individuals from our diocese who were both recently married. Make sure you keep it here. So much more to come when we return.
When storms hit, we are there to rebuild. As our neighbors age, we lighten their burdens. As our veterans adjust, we ease their transitions. We are Catholic Charities, and we are there. Join us at wearethere.us.
This is Katie Wagner, editor-in-chief of the Catholic Echo magazine, and I am here with two of my recently married colleagues, Maddie Francisco and Hannah Shaw. Now, Maddie, you do youth and young adult accompaniment, correct?
Yes.
And Hannah, you are the assistant archivist. We're here today to talk about marriage. It is National Marriage Week. I also am preparing for marriage myself. I recently went through pre-Cana, and so let's talk a little bit about that. Let's start there. So what in particular did you guys have to do when you were preparing to receive this sacrament? And did you do pre-Cana here in the diocese? Just, tell me a little bit about that process for you.
I did do pre-Cana in the diocese. We worked with one of our priests, our lovely priests here in the diocese, and met about 6 to 8 times just to go over our inventory. We went through all of the ins and outs of what you might run into as a married couple. And what I loved most about it was that we were given the space to just be open and honest and really delve into
the issues you could run into.
Yeah, really delve into the challenges we may have as a couple, but also prepare for the many blessings that might come about as a married couple too.
Oh, yeah. Marriage absolutely is full of blessings. And actually, on the podcast before you guys was a couple who's been married, I think, 50 years, which is very cool. So, and you're from Ashtabula, correct?
Correct.
Is that where you got married?
Yes. So my husband was very adamant about sticking to the tradition that you get married in the woman's church that she grew up in. So we did get married, not necessarily in the church that I received all my sacraments, but in the same parish. So up in my hometown in Ashtabula is where we got married at Our Lady of Peace. And we had our reception out in the Willoughby area.
And now, Hannah, you are Catholic, but your spouse is not, correct?
Correct. He is Presbyterian.
So what did the preparation process look like for you? Was it any different?
I think the discussion was probably a little different. So we did our engaged couples retreat was in St. Columba in the hall. So it was about 40 couples actually that were all getting married at different churches throughout the diocese. And some outside of the diocese too that I think the date just worked and they were interested in the program. So we did that. It was a full day. It was 9 to 4, I think, and we went over some different things. So there was a priest there at first that kind of like went over what it means, what the sacrament means to us. And that was really great for my husband to get acquainted with what it means to get married in the Catholic Church and why it was important to me. And then we went over, like Maddie said, some of the maybe issues that might come up, like finances, if we talked about finances, if you talked about what you want your family to look like, how many kids, how many pets, like where you want to live, how you're going to spend holidays. And it really just opened it to a great dialogue, like things that I think we were pretty good at already handling and we were on the same page with. But I would imagine if you hadn't discussed those things, it was great. And then Monsignor Sifrin did our wedding. We were married at St. Columba in the cathedral, and we met with him I think 4 times, kind of to go more in depth with what we discussed at our pre-Cana,
Oh, that's great.
Nice.
Yeah, I just did it myself. I live in the Diocese of Pittsburgh, so I went to my fiance's parish that he grew up in, and they were a one-day situation, just like you're describing. And I was kind of surprised, like, there were a lot of games. And
activities,
like, like, I was not expecting it to, like, be fun. Like, maybe my attitude is bad, but I was like, oh, I'm going to be bored. I was not bored.
That's funny.
You know?
Ours was mostly talks. Yeah, we barely did any games. We mostly, like, sat in, I think there were, like, 4 or 5 talks, and they were really good, but it was a very slow day, but good, like beneficial. We definitely learned some stuff, but we did ours up in Cleveland just because it was a day that worked for us at the Jesuit Retreat Center.
Okay, we did like Jeopardy, like I don't know, it was fun.
That's fun.
But, ours was probably half and half of games and talks, which was nice to split it up nice. Nice. And then we made sure to go out to dinner after and like talk about it also. It was like a little reward.
Also did that. Yes.
I had to run to mass afterward. I was cantering, so didn't really have like time to talk about it.
Gosh.
But it was good. And I am going to start, I think on the 9th of February, I'm going to start talking to my pastor about, having the marriage talks and everything.
Nice.
So what would you say your favorite parts of your weddings were? Like, Maddie, what was your favorite part?
The favorite part of my wedding, I loved how many people came to our mass. I'm just so grateful that, like, so many of the people that we invited, even if they weren't Catholic, because my husband was a convert from being Lutheran, and he just converted a couple years ago. And so his whole entire family is Lutheran. And I loved seeing, like, literally his whole family still came there to support him and be there at our wedding mass, which really means the world. Because I know, like, it's easy to get sucked into, like, the stresses of, like, planning, but the mass and the reception and obviously everything in between. But, like, I just wanted to, like, I really didn't care what happened after the mass. Like, the reception could happen, it could not happen. By the end of the mass, I was kind of just exhausted anyway. I probably could have slept for, like, 3 days. I'm not even joking. But, yeah, so the reception, like, I know with other stories that I've heard, a lot of people just show up to the reception, and I'm sure we had some of that too, but it just meant a lot for people to be there for us to celebrate the Eucharist. And I love how many priests came and celebrated and con-celebrated our wedding mass too, because we had about like 6 priests there, and it was so fun. Just like priests that I grew up with, or priests that I've become good friends with over the years and gotten close to, and so that just like really meant a lot to have so many people by our side to celebrate the sacrament with us.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And you did a full mass, I take it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
Awesome. How about you, Hannah? What did you like?
I think my favorite part of the ceremony was, like Maddie said, like, you're sitting up there and it's going so quickly. Like, you don't realize how quickly mass can go by. But it's, like, gone like that. And just to, like, look out and see everyone's faces and see people from work smiling at you and from past jobs smiling at you and relatives on both sides and friends was really special. But I think my favorite part was we had 2 of my cousins bring up the gifts to us, and that was just like such a grounding moment during it. Was like, okay, reset, we're seeing like smiling faces, this is really happening. Like,
and that's such a key point in the liturgy too.
And it kind of is like your nerves will be rushing, it's all going so quickly, you're like snapping in and out of paying attention, thinking about later, like what's going to happen later, what could go wrong. That really was just like brought us back down to okay, we're in mass, this is happening.
Yeah.
It's a sacrament, it's important. And
I feel like I felt very at peace, kind of like what you said. And I feel like it was, like, God definitely gave us the grace, I think, to be present, like, for that hour of Mass, you know, like just to like kind of soak it all in. I mean, I was bawling the whole time. I mean, I was just crying. You know, part of it was being at peace. Part of it was just relief that it was finally here. Yeah, it was a very emotional time, but just overall, like, I think God gave the grace to just like be at peace.
Yeah, I did not think I would cry, but I cried the whole time, I think.
Same.
I cried when we walked down. I cried when we were sitting there.
I knew I would cry. And then, one of my favorite parts to add on to that, sorry, Anna, not to interrupt, but my husband, I didn't know if he would cry when I walked down the aisle. Like, he's not really an emotional guy. Yeah. So, and he did. He bawled, and I loved it. It was so precious to me. It was so, I couldn't have asked for, like, it's like those little things, you know, people are like, oh, like the groom's reaction. It's like, I couldn't, not like I was gonna, you know, it was all natural, you know, and I couldn't have asked for like a better reaction. But when I saw him cry, that's when I started crying. And then I just didn't stop. So.
Yeah, and we have seminarians intern with us in the archives, so they were my altar servers. So, like, seeing them up smiling as they gave my husband the rings was too, like, oh, like, this is everybody together.
So precious.
Brought us here. Yeah.
Aw.
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, so you'll cry throughout the whole thing. You could possibly cry.
Maybe,
yeah.
Are you an emotional person? Are you a crier?
Yeah, I would say I probably should go get a handkerchief or something. Yeah. My dress does have pockets.
That's
mine did too.
genius.
Yeah.
Oh, I so am jealous. I wish mine did. That would have come in handy.
Yeah.
Now, what were your wedding dates again? Remind me. Because, Hannah, you got married first, correct?
Mine was June 8th.
June
2024, so last summer.
Okay.
Or this summer,
What about you?
October 26th of 2024.
So summer wedding and fall wedding. Those are very good times to get married.
Yeah.
So
more popular than I thought it would be. When we started booking stuff, people were like, October is like the new May. I'm like, that's insane. I would have never picked this month if I knew that was the case.
Yeah.
I bet it was lovely, though.
Yes. Oh, man. The leaves were perfect. We couldn't have asked for better weather, better lighting. Like, it was a very, very beautiful day all around. So, yeah, very grateful.
Yeah, we had perfect weather, too, and they were calling for rain all week. Oh, no. So I had myself convinced, like, oh, it's better for the pictures that it's cloudy and gray. Yeah. Like, the pictures will come out better.
You won't
My
be
senior
squinting.
friend was telling me the same thing. He's like, yeah, I was a photographer. That's better. And then day came. It was, like, 75, sunny. The sky was so bright blue. It was perfect. I was like, okay, good. I'm glad it's so good.
Aww. Oh, that's so good.
Yeah. Yeah, it was perfect. Yeah.
So let's end with, do you have any advice for someone who is planning their wedding? And this can be, you know, either marriage advice or planning advice.
My first piece of advice would be, don't let the stresses of everybody else's opinions, the stresses of booking your vendors on time, just don't even let any of that trivial stuff take up your space in your mind and in your heart and like take away your peace.
That is a very solid piece of advice.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, I agree with that. You definitely have to do what you two want to do. And I was really lucky that my husband was really present in our planning, which I think saved me through like everything, because there comes a point where you just cannot call another person. But he would call just to kind of save my peace. But I think the best thing that I think we did with our wedding was really be present. And I know that everybody says that, but it was really important to us to be there to greet people when they came. So, like, we kind of cut our pictures short and showed up at cocktail hour. And it was nice because as people came in, like, we're hugging them, we're saying hi. And we really felt like we actually got to talk to everybody there, because so many times you don't get to. Yeah, so I think just talking to everyone, giving yourself time to visit, not, like, follow that strict timeline that you'll see on Pinterest was really important.
That's very good advice, too. So, well, I thank you guys so much for joining me here today. If anyone would like additional information or resources, either on marriage and family life, preparing for marriage, or let's say maybe you want information on the retreat at the cathedral for engaged couples, all of that information can be found at www.doy.org.
The Catholic Echo podcast is a production of the Roman Catholic Diocese of Youngstown. Your host has been Dennis Biviana. Have a blessed day, and may God be with you.